Japan's leading car makers face uncertainty as US President-elect Donald Trump signals major policy changes aimed at revitalizing American.
Makers are optimistic about the trade discussions between Tokyo and Washington. The two sides reached a basic agreement in late.
But I just signed the largest trade deal in history. I think maybe the largest deal in history with Japan.
One by one, the engines went quiet. Not because the machines failed, but because someone, somewhere, decided they should. Factories emptied overnight. Maps were redrawn in silence. And as America pointed fingers, Japan quietly crossed the border. What they built next would change North America's future forever. The unraveling. In 2025, the global auto industry entered a new phase of uncertainty. US President Donald Trump reintroduced a wave of tariffs targeting steel, aluminum, vehicles, and auto parts, measures designed to bring manufacturing back to American soil. The policy sounded decisive, but its effects spread in unexpected directions. Japanese automakers, long considered anchors of US manufacturing, suddenly found their North American operations under strain. Toyota, Honda, Subaru, and Mazda had spent decades building local supply chains that employed tens of thousands of American workers. Those systems depended on predictable trade flows and minimal border costs. The new tariffs disrupted both. Production costs for vehicles assembled in the US began climbing rapidly. Imported components became more expensive, and cross-border logistics slowed as tariff compliance rules multiplied. Analysts estimated that the combined effect added between 20 and 30% to the total cost of a typical Japanese-made vehicle sold in the United States. Inside boardrooms in Tokyo and Nagoya, the question was no longer ideological. It was mathematical. Could they continue to operate profitably inside an unstable policy environment? For several major automakers, the answer soon became clear. The time had come to look north. Subaru's silent move. The first major signal came from Subaru. For decades, its Lafayette, Indiana plant had been one of the most productive automotive facilities in the United States, known for manufacturing the Outback, the brand's best-selling model in North America. But in early 2025, Subaru's leadership made a strategic announcement that marked a turning point. Production of the Outback for the Canadian market would move back to Gunma, Japan. On paper, the decision looked routine. In reality, it reflected a deep structural shift in global manufacturing logic. Canada's trade framework under the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, allows Japanese exports to enter tariff-free. The United States, meanwhile, had reintroduced multiple layers of tariffs, 25% on vehicles and key components, creating a financial imbalance that made cross-border operations unsustainable. In just one fiscal year, Subaru's exports from the US to Canada dropped from 26% to around 10%. The remaining share was redirected through Japan, avoiding tariff exposure entirely. This was not a retreat from North America, but a rerouting of efficiency. Inside the auto industry, Subaru's move was seen as the first clear indication that Japan's automakers no longer viewed the US as the region's central production hub. For suppliers and logistics firms tied to the Indiana facility, the effects were immediate: reduced demand, paused contracts, and job uncertainty. But in Japan, the narrative was different. Executives described the shift as a move toward resilience and predictability. The logic was simple. If one trade border becomes unpredictable, find another that isn't. Subaru's decision was not emotional, it was mathematical. And soon the rest of Japan's automotive giants began to run the same equation. The domino effect. Subaru's realignment was only the beginning. Within months, other Japanese automakers started adjusting their North American operations, not with public announcements, but with quiet strategic moves. Toyota, Honda, Mazda, and Mitsubishi each began reconfiguring supply routes, research centers, and assembly priorities to limit their exposure to U.S. tariffs. The pattern became clear by mid-2025. Every major Japanese manufacturer was redirecting part of its production north into Canada, where predictable policy and free trade frameworks still supported long-term planning. The difference between Ottawa and Washington could not have been starker. While the U.S. imposed tariffs of up to 25% on imported vehicles and parts, Canada's trade agreements with Japan kept duties effectively at zero. Industry analysts began calling it the quiet migration. In total, Japanese automakers were losing an estimated $25 billion per year in tariff-related costs in the U.S. market. Toyota alone absorbed nearly half of that loss. The financial logic was undeniable. Relocating key operations north of the border could restore competitiveness almost overnight. In Ontario, provincial officials moved quickly to attract these shifts. Investment incentives, energy rebates, and streamlined permitting turned the region into a manufacturing magnet. Plants in Alliston, Cambridge, and Woodstock expanded capacity, while Japanese suppliers opened new logistics and design offices across the Toronto corridor. For Japan's auto industry, Canada was no longer just a secondary option. It was becoming the new anchor of their North American network. The move wasn't driven by ideology or geopolitics. It was driven by economics. Stable policy meant predictable costs, and predictability had become more valuable than proximity. By late 2025, the outlines of a new industrial map were visible. The US was losing factories, while Canada was gaining an entire future. The Canadian advantage. For Japan's automakers, the shift toward Canada wasn't just a reaction, it was a strategic correction. Canada offered what the US no longer guaranteed: long-term policy stability and access to tariff-free global trade. Through its participation in the CPTPP, Canada maintained open markets with Japan, shielding manufacturers from the heavy import duties now crippling operations south of the border. Ontario quickly became the center of this industrial realignment. The province already hosted 7 Japanese automotive plants, 5 for light vehicles, 1 for engines, and another for trucks. Around them, an ecosystem of suppliers, logistics firms, and engineering companies supported more than 30,000 direct jobs. Over time, those factories became a model of reliability. By 2025, new investments began flowing again. Toyota expanded hybrid and EV production in Cambridge, while Honda prepared new lines in Alliston dedicated to electric powertrains. Even smaller brands such as Mazda and Mitsubishi moved research and logistics operations to Toronto, treating it as a neutral and predictable bridge between Asia and the North American market. Economists drew parallels to the 1980s, when Japan's automakers first built in Canada to bypass Reagan-era import limits. 4 decades later, history appeared to be repeating itself, but on a larger scale. Instead of escaping quotas, companies were escaping volatility. Canada's appeal was simple: transparent regulations, stable energy costs, skilled labor, and an open-door trade policy. While U.S. plants faced compliance uncertainty and rising costs, Ontario offered consistency. In an era where unpredictability is the biggest financial risk, Canada had become not just an alternative, but the most logical choice for global manufacturers. The irony of protectionism. The very policies designed to revive American industry were now pushing it away. Trump's tariffs were meant to bring production home, to make Made in America a badge of strength again. Instead, they drove up the cost of doing business inside the United States. When Washington imposed 25% duties on vehicles, steel, aluminum, and parts, the logic was simple: make foreign imports expensive enough that automakers would relocate manufacturing to U.S. soil. But the outcome was the opposite. Domestic assembly plants still depended on global parts networks. Engines, electronics, and transmissions often crossed borders multiple times before a car was finished. Every tariff layer added cost. Analysts at Fusion TG estimated that once all import duties and logistics adjustments were applied, the price of a Japanese-made vehicle sold in the U.S. could more than double. Even U.S. assembled models using imported components faced margin losses of up to 30%. The math simply didn't work. By contrast, Canada's zero tariff trade with Japan under the CPTPP allowed companies to keep costs predictable while maintaining North American access. Ottawa's consistent energy and tax policies only reinforced that advantage. Ironically, Washington's attempt to isolate competitors ended up strengthening an alliance between Japan and Canada, a partnership that now fuels North America's next phase of automotive innovation. In trying to wall off the world, the U.S. had given its neighbors the blueprint for resilience. The global shift. By late 2025, Japan's strategy had set a precedent. Others were quick to follow. European and South Korean automakers began redirecting their own logistics and R&D operations to Canada, replicating the same split supply model. Design and innovation in their home countries. Production and export from Canadian facilities. Toronto, once known primarily as a financial center, evolved into a logistics and export management hub. The surrounding region of Ontario became the anchor of a reconfigured North American automotive corridor, linking Asia, Europe, and the Americas through predictable trade routes and clean energy integration. At the same time, Canada's mineral wealth, particularly lithium, nickel, and cobalt, began feeding directly into Japan's growing electric vehicle supply chain. These materials formed the backbone of next-generation battery systems, turning Ontario and Quebec into strategic partners in the global clean energy transition. Economists started calling it a structural reset of world trade. Every new tariff or restriction imposed elsewhere only strengthened Canada's position as a neutral gateway economy. The result was more than a shift in geography. It was a shift in logic. Stability, once overlooked, had become the most valuable resource in the global market. Reflection and future. The reshaping of North America's auto industry is no longer speculation. It's underway. Factories that once defined the American Midwest are slowing down, while Canadian assembly lines expand with quiet precision. Japan's automakers didn't abandon the United States out of protest. They simply followed the numbers. Canada's advantage wasn't built on slogans or politics. It was built on predictability, a quality that now defines success in global manufacturing. In a world of shifting trade barriers, the nations that stay open and consistent attract the future. This realignment is bigger than cars or tariffs. It's a reflection of how global industries now respond to uncertainty by moving towards stability wherever it exists. Japan recognized it first. Others are following fast. And as the engines restart north of the border, one question lingers for Washington. How long can a nation lead the world when its own walls keep closing in?